Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Interfaith Alliance to our webinar today on reproductive and religious freedom from grassroots to Grasstops. My name is Skye Perryman, and I have the honor of sitting on the executive board of the Interfaith Alliance, and I am joined today by three tremendous panelists. I know I speak for all of our panelists, and I'll introduce them in a minute when I say we want this to be as interactive as possible. We are here to be a resource for you, and so please do populate the chat with questions, and our panelists I know are going to be willing and excited and welcoming of your questions. And we will also start with some questions that we received before the webinar today in order to get our discussion started. Without further ado, I will introduce our wonderful panelists today. First is Reverend Deneen Robinson. She is a pastor of UCOC and the Director of Religious Policy and Strategy at the National Birth Equity Collaborative. Reverend Deneen really needs no introduction. She has won so many phenomenal awards for her long-standing work at the intersection of justice, of equity, of religious freedom, and of reproductive freedom and justice. And we are so happy to have her today here with us at the Interfaith Alliance. Next, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jennifer Villavicencio. Dr. Villavicencio is an obstetrician gynecologist. She is fellowship trained and board certified. She is a abortion provider as well as an obstetric care provider. She provides comprehensive reproductive health care. She is also a member of the Catholics for Choice board and is a longstanding advocate for health equity, for justice, and for civil rights, as well as for reproductive and religious freedom. So Dr. V, we are so happy that you are here with us at the Interfaith Alliance today. And next is Nadia Muhajir, who is the co-executive director for HEART. We are so incredibly excited that you're joining us today, Nadia, and I'm especially excited because this is our first conversation together. And so thank you so much for being here. And I just wanted to encourage all of you, if you're on our webinar today, you probably know a little bit about the Interfaith Alliance, but please visit the Interfaith Alliance's website. We are a national organization that are committed to both the protection of religious freedom and of democracy, which of course includes reproductive and religious freedom, which is our topic today. So I will start us off with Reverend Deneen. And I would love to hear from you, Reverend Deneen. You've worn many hats in your long and amazing career, and would love to hear about the National Birth Equity Collaborative, what it is, and what you are working on at NBEC.
First of all, I want to say thank you all for my presence as a part of this amazing team this morning. National Birth Equity Collaborative is an organization that seeks to center Black birth and fight for all things on the reproductive continuum, from making sure that birthing is safe and respectful, and also making sure that the babies that are born and have a healthy start, and abortion access, as well as dealing with infertility. My specific role is one that was created so that we can effectively respond to the trauma that is being put upon us by religious ideas under the guise of religious freedom. For us, it's important that folks who are choosing to birth, whether it's actually have babies, parent the babies that they have, or choosing to not parent at all, that they aren't impacted by the state-sanctioned violence under the guise of religious freedom. And so I am creating a clergy service that will have Black clergy initially, that are trained to go speak in congregations, to have these honest conversations, and creating tools so folks can be able to respond both in a political space and in a faith space to the things that are being used to cause harm to our reproductive freedom.
Thank you, Reverend Deneen. And you and I have spoken about this moment before. And we're awaiting a Supreme Court decision that might, and it looks like it might further restrict the rights of people to exercise reproductive freedom, and to, and it might undermine reproductive justice. Of course, for many years, you've been saying that, many of these rights have been consistently restricted, but that we're really facing another precipice now. And so I'm wondering if you could talk with our audience gathered here today about how you, as a reverend and as an advocate and as an activist and expert, are thinking about our current moment, both as, in your roles as both a clergy person and an advocate.
So for me, I feel like abortion is the carrot that they're having us chase. The deeper issues that we are going to be plagued with as a country is the loss of our ultimate freedom to choose and the right to privacy. One of the things that I've been sharing with my congregants and other folks who will listen is the thing that's going to impact us most is the freedoms that we take for granted, like feeling safe in our homes, feeling safe in the world, knowing that people can't just get in our business because they want to, or because our neighbors don't like us, or any of those ridiculous reasons. But losing Roe is going to put those things in jeopardy. And it's important that as we look at what's happening right now, we understand that it's multi-layered. While yes, we absolutely need to fight for the right for us to have access to abortion care and all the things connected to that, but it's bigger than that. For me, as a Black queer person, it is also knowing that the Lawrence case was built on Roe. And so the loss of Roe means that now I'm going to have to think really hard about where I choose to live and the neighborhood I live in, because the police could potentially come in my home in the middle of the night and arrest me because I still live in Texas. Or because I'm in a domestic partnership, the risk of not having full access to my partner should there's something happen to her medically once Roe falls. Our right to privacy was strengthened because of Roe. And there's so many things that we will be impacted by. And it's really sad to me that the church has been used as a pawn in this game, because every major religion in this country is based on choice. It's based on choice. No one is coerced into their religious construct. They choose it. And so to know that this same ideal is being used to restrict choice is something that is unsettling to me and says so much about where we're going as a country. That we only want certain people to have the right to choose. And at any given moment, that's the group of people that have the right to choose could change. And also that women are being used also as people who are unfortunately contributing to their own demise or the demise of their children. It is really important that we begin to see that abortion access is something that fundamentally belongs to all of us, whether we are of age to access abortion or need an abortion or not. It's something that we all should fight hard for us to have access to.
And so, Reverend, just briefly, and then we'll go to the other panelists, and please do put your questions in the chat. I'm already seeing some because we will have time to address these questions. But you have, in terms of abortion bans in particular, you've talked a lot about the disproportionate harm that people already face with respect to discriminatory obstacles to accessing healthcare. Can you talk
Yes.
and share with this audience a bit about that and why you think, both as a reverend and as an advocate, that is important as we chart a path forward from today?
So I was listening to a story on, my partner is one of the people that does the transcribing for people who are hard of hearing. And she was doing a story where a young girl is 17 because she's not dead, did not know she was pregnant and delivered her baby at home and stabbed the baby to death. She did not tell her parents that she was being sexually active and had stopped having her period because they are devout Catholics, and she knew that they would be upset with her and would not, and she could potentially have some struggles with her family. She also said that she didn't want to get in trouble. Her parents are the ones who turned her into the police, interestingly. I read that story and I thought, wow, so this is a living testimony to what SB 8 has done to our state. We now have people who are willing to kill a baby because they are afraid that they're going to get in trouble, and they can't have an abortion because they found out after 8 weeks. What kind of world are we living in? That is absolutely, in my opinion, against God. Just, there's no way to make that be godly. The other thing that I want to say as it relates to abortion bans, it is something for a person to have to travel thousands of miles now to access care because they can't get an abortion in their state as a result of something that's happened. I personally, and as a clergy person, don't see any benefit to bans, except that it restricts the lives of folk who are already restricted. It causes great harm to people who are already being harmed in this country. And it makes them, they're either going to be in one of two categories. They're either going to be folk who commit a crime to get an abortion, they commit a crime to have a back alley abortion, or they take the risk of committing a crime in some states of going outside of their state to access an abortion. Or one I forgot to mention, they become a part of a slave class. Because being forced to parent against your will is, and having to continue to have babies that you cannot afford, only makes you at risk for poverty if you're not already poor. And if you are poor, you visit that poverty on 3 generations. So it becomes hopeless for you to get out of the state that you're in.
Sorry. Reverend Deneen, thank you for those thoughts. We will move to Dr. Jennifer Villavicencio, and who, again, to remind you of Dr. V's background, she is an abortion provider, an obstetric care provider, delivers babies on call most weeks, and is also on the Catholic for Choice board, as well as a health equity expert. And Dr. V, I wanted to start with you because of your role in Catholics for Choice. And in the news media, there seems to be a misconception that certain religious groups, and Catholics are among them, are inherently anti-abortion. And I would love to hear your thoughts and you to share your thoughts on what you would say about that type of an assumption.
Thank you so much, Sky, for having me. And I'm really excited to be on this panel and be talking to you all, although it is about something that's really grave and super concerned to care for. One of the reasons that I wanted to be on the board of Catholics for Choice, which is an organization that stands up and represents the majority of Catholics that support abortion, as well as provides a home for many faith traditions for people who want to be able to rectify their faith traditions with their belief that people should be able to make decisions about their own reproductive destinies. And so Catholics for Choice does a lot of work in that area. And, we know, for example, that not only do the majority of Catholics support abortion, but we also know that Catholics and other religious traditions have abortions at the same rate as everybody else in this country. Abortion is a necessary part of the reproductive life cycle and of reproductive care. And the argument, the politicization of abortion in this country has been couched oftentimes in religious terms. It oftentimes for people is a dichotomy. They have to either side with their faith or side with supporting someone who is getting an abortion. And that's just not the reality of the way that people live their lives. Certainly, we know that the origins of the anti-abortion movement in this country were not religious. They were, in fact, rooted not only in the ostracization of certain people from the medical field early in the 20th century, and then later on, after Roe versus Wade, we know that it was an answer to the loss by certain white supremacists of segregation. One segregation was ruled to be unconstitutional, and that fight was lost. White supremacists need to find something else, and they found the anti-abortion movement and sort of went on a roll with that. And so it is not inherently a religious movement by any means at all, although it oftentimes is paralleled with that or kept together with it. And that causes a lot of trouble for a lot of people, not only those who are supporting abortion rights and abortion care, but also those who are receiving abortion care. We know that this country is filled with people with deep and faithful traditions, religious traditions and culture. And we also know that it's filled with 1 in 4 people who will need abortions by the time that they're 45. And it is extraordinarily challenging and heartbreaking when people have to come up against that and feel like they are somehow disappointing or not living up to their faith tradition because they are exercising part of essential healthcare that is accessing abortion. On a regular basis, I talk to people about, they bring it up to me, they bring up their faith tradition, and they ask me if they're going to hell. They ask me if they think that God is going to judge them because they're having abortions. And these are conversations that I'm having in the midst of clinic, where what they should be worried about is, going home and recovering and feeling better and getting back to their lives after the very safe abortion that they're going to receive. But instead, they're worried about how their decisions are going to interplay with their faith. And it's incredibly heartbreaking, given that so many faith traditions support abortion access. And even if they don't overtly, like, for example, in Catholicism, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church does not necessarily support abortion. We know that everyday Catholics do. And that's who we want to support and be able to speak to, is those who are living in their faith traditions and in real life every day.
And you mentioned a statistic, Dr. V, that I've heard you reference before, which is that 1 in 4 women will require abortion care at some point before the age of 45. And so what I'd like to do is, moving from that, as a person and a physician that provides abortion care along with other comprehensive reproductive health care, how are you thinking about the risks and implications of the potential Dobbs decision to patients and abortion providers on the ground? And I know that answer may be different in various parts of the United States, but if you could help our audience sort of understand how you're thinking about it and how your colleagues are thinking about it.
Yeah, I have to say, with full disclosure, I'm in a pretty dark place right now. We know that the decision that's going to come down is going to be devastating and likely will be a near, or if not complete, overturn of Roe, as Reverend Denise said. And so that is terrifying for people like me who, when someone who's pregnant comes to us and needs help, whether they need help caring for their pregnancy because they want to continue and they want to parent, or because they need to end their pregnancy. We know that almost immediately in almost half of the country, abortion will become illegal. And it's not just the ability to access abortion. We know that these abortion restrictions, because they're written by people who are not medical, but rather ideological, and these laws are not based in science, that they touch all different types of reproductive health care. They touch not being able to access abortion is important and necessary in of itself. That piece, but it also impacts people who are having miscarriages, people who have ectopic pregnancies, who have severe complications later in pregnancy. It's forcing people like myself to have to think about how far we're willing to go, and how much we're willing to risk to take care of somebody. If there's somebody who's in front of me and there's an exception for life and risk of the mother, for example, but the penalty is criminal, I have to decide at what point, how sick is that person that I'm willing to risk criminal penalties for myself, potentially for my family, in order to care for that person. It's an incredibly devastating thought process and preparation to be having to go through. I was just having this conversation with some of the folks that I work with, that this is disaster preparedness. We're not doing prevention anymore. We are literally preparing for a disaster, and how to mitigate these effects, even though we know that they're going to be dire. And that's not a hopeful message right now. And that's why I gave the full disclosure of where I'm at. But I was on a call last night for 2 hours talking to abortion providers about how we're going to manage the influx of patients that are coming into where, I provide. And do we do evening hours? Do we go 24 hours? Is there enough staff? How do people afford it? Do we let people drive? There's all of these logistics that we should not have to be talking about. And I frankly kind of resent the fact that as a physician, I have to be talking about things like that. All I want to do is take care of my patients and give them the care that they need.
Thank you for sharing that with our audience today, many of whom, are not physicians and are not on the ground with the lived experience that you have and that your colleagues have. And I know that it's wonderful to be able to learn from you so that people in their own roles can figure out sort of what their role is going to be and how they can try to make a difference in what is a devastating time. Nadia, we are so excited that you're here today. And you also, I know, have public health expertise as well as many other expertises. But I think if you could start and share with our group here today what HEART is, your co-executive director, what is the organization's role in your mission, and what work you're doing as an organization.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me today. And I want to express my gratitude to Dr. V and Reverend Deneen for the incredible work you all are doing. I'm just humbled to be alongside of you and to hear of just the, it gives me goosebumps to think about, to hear your stories and to hear that real experience, that real life experience that you guys are all sort of navigating. And thank you to the Interfaith Alliance for having me as well. So I'm co-founder and co-executive director at HEART. We are a national nonprofit that is working to advance reproductive justice and uproot gendered violence in Muslim communities in particular. And so how we do this is by establishing choice and access for the most impacted Muslims, and through our 4 programming arms, which is health education, advocacy, research, and training. And so for the last 12 years, we've been working in Muslim communities alongside Muslim communities to equip them with the language that they need, with the resources that they need, and ultimately, hopefully, the choice that they need to make informed decisions about their bodies, their sex and sexual violence, and ultimately become resources for the communities in which they live, work, and pray in. And so a lot of what Dr. V and Reverend Deneen were sharing about the burden that that they see their patients holding of like, is God going to be mad at me, or am I doing something that is not aligned with my religious beliefs? That is something that we sort of navigate every day. And it's really interesting because in our current political climate, despite the fact that we know, and I'm sure, both the Reverend and the doctor can attest to themselves, but we know that, family planning, access to contraception, pregnancy loss, termination, they're lived realities for Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And, for Muslims in particular, often these stories are not captured for 2 reasons. The first is that, the stigma that is associated with reproductive health and sexual health in Muslim communities perpetuates a silence around this and kind of isolates those who are navigating really common reproductive health experiences to navigate them alone. And then secondly, mainstream services and information that's available, typically it's not culturally responsive to the needs of, particular needs of diverse Muslim communities. And so what we have here is this dilemma where you have an era where Muslims are hyper visible, right, due to increased anti-Muslim rhetoric, but their reproductive health experiences are virtually invisible. And what's really interesting is that a recent report by ISPU, which is the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, shows actually more than half of Muslims support access to legal abortion. So, to say that, there's a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric right now about the leaked report saying, oh, it's like Islamic Sharia, and this is just, that is very Islamophobic, because if you actually look at what our faith tradition, what the stance is, it's actually very wide, and there is absolutely a space for abortion in our communities and in our faith tradition. So, I want to real quick just talk a little bit about what it means to be at the intersection of Muslim communities and reproductive justice. I often get asked, what does Islam say about X? What does Islam say about abortion, birth control? So first and foremost, I want to say Islam isn't a person, so it doesn't say anything. And second of all, it's complicated. Like there's no black and white answer. And so there's a few high-level points that I want to make about that. First, Muslims are the most diverse religious minority in North America. And I don't just mean that racially, I mean with respect to education, geography, socioeconomics, ability, sexual orientation, and even religious, and especially religious practice. And so they're not a monolith. And this presents both opportunities and challenges for like, how do you even address their needs when they're standing at these multiple oppressions? The second thing that I want to say is that there's no single interpretation of any one issue in Islamic law. So Islamic law is wide and diverse, and there are opinions on reproductive rights that range from extremely restrictive to extremely permissible and everything in between. And regarding abortion, as I mentioned, there is space for it in Islamic law, and the rulings differ based on who you choose to follow and what your school of thought is. And more complicated cases were always considered by a case-by-case basis. So, to say that this is Islamic Sharia is just absolutely incorrect, because it's always been a part of our faith tradition, and with really little debate, to be honest. And then finally, Islamic law has never been static. It's evolved over time, and it has responded to cultural and social and political contexts as a way to stay relevant to Muslims. And so, a perfect example of this is fertility treatments. They didn't exist 1400 years ago, and now they do. And they've evolved Islamic law to sort of create opinions around that so Muslims can access it. And so those are the three things that I want to say that we consider when we're doing our work in our community, and also some of the education that we're doing.
Well, first of all, thank you for making space for both the work that you're doing every day in your community and in the world more broadly, but also, and all of you, Dr. V and Reverend Robinson and Nadia, I mean, all of you for really helping educate us on areas that not everybody that's on this webinar has the full, none of us have the full benefit of your experiences and the work you're doing in the communities you're doing. And so this is just a tremendous opportunity and gift for many of us who are seeking to learn more and to understand more in this time. So thank you so much, Nadia. I want to talk with you a bit about, what we talk about grassroots work, and people have different definitions of what that is. But I do know that you're doing such tremendous work, and I would love to hear from you about the role that you see grassroots work playing in this time, and in the time that we think is coming very soon after the Supreme Court issues its decision, and in that fight for what we call reproductive justice, which of course is what you're talking about, and our panelists are talking about today. So could you help our audience understand a bit about the role of grassroots work, and then we'll have some open discussion questions for the group, and then get to folks' questions in the chat. But I would love to hear a bit from you on that, please.
Sure, thank you. I think I want to kind of center my points for that question on two different kind of angles. So one is, the really, and this was pointed out again by the Reverend and the doctor about, impact or uplifting the voices of those living at multiple intersections. I think that, storytelling is going to be really important of how and why this issue impacts everyone, and why this is not a women's issue only, and why this, why families should care about this, why communities should care about this, right? And really uplifting those multiple intersections as well, and painting a broad and nuanced picture of how anyone who can get pregnant will be impacted. So Dr. V, like your insights on how, even as a medical practitioner, you're going to start thinking about, well, what about fertility treatments, and what about, all of the other ways that it's really important to raise awareness. Because I think when people hear, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and when they hear about this, they think abortion, and that's all they think. They don't think about miscarriage. They don't think about other ways that pregnant people will in theory be impacted, and that it actually has implications for the entirety of reproductive health care, and not just this one procedure, right? So that's the one thing I think that is really important, to just uplift that storytelling and really have those voices out there. The second thing is, I really expect grassroots work involving a lot of political education around what it even means to fight for reproductive justice. So to my point earlier about how it's more than just abortion access, I really love this quote from Loretta Ross, where she says, both the pro-life and pro-choice movement started in the wrong place. They start with pregnancy and not with what's going on in people's lives before they become pregnant. And I think that is also really important for us to think about, is, how also even just think about the words pro-choice and pro-life. Like, I struggle with them because they're so politicized now, and they're so like either or. And I feel like there's a lot more, it's been weaponized really to create this political division instead of bring people together on shared values. And so a lot of our work, I think, is going to be providing this political education and educating people on how, this is more than just about abortion access, what it even means, what is reproductive, like really breaking down concepts to very simple ideas, and mobilizing people on these shared values around, bodily autonomy and compassion and agency, I think, and consent. I think that will be really important for us to, especially when we're mobilizing communities.
Great. So I'd like to thank you, Vanadia, and I'd like to now talk about something that I know is one we've seen some private messages from panelists, and I mean from the attendees, sorry, and we know that it's on folks' mind, which is just the obvious one, right? I mean, you all have expertise in a lot of the work you do, but you're also faith leaders, and you also are part of faith traditions, and integrate those traditions with the work that you do. And so one question that we hear often is anti-abortion activists often use religion as a justification to deny access to abortion. And they also use that as a justification to deny access to reproductive health more generally, but particularly with abortion, this is something that we hear a lot. And so why is it important for faith voices to speak out at this moment as abortion is becoming more restricted? So I will turn it first, I think, Dr. Villavicencio, and then we'll go to Reverend Deneen and Nadia. Would love to hear your perspectives. I know our attendees are all asking sort of similar versions of this question.
I talked a little bit about how religion has been co-opted by the anti-choice side or those who want to ban abortion. But I also think that it has been in a lot of ways rejected by the movement to keep abortion legal. It's been talked about in a very secular way, and in a way that sometimes doesn't respond to the way that people actually live their lives, which is an intersection of faith, if they do have a faith tradition, an intersection of faith, and then all of these other things happening at once. And I see that on a regular basis in the lived experience of my patients. They come in and they say, I never thought that I would need an abortion, but now I do. And they're having to work on rectifying that within their entire lives. And so the voices of faith leaders, people coming out and talking about not only their various faith traditions and what those may say about it, or saying, hey, listen, yes, we know the Catholic hierarchy says X, Y, and Z about abortion and is extraordinarily firm about it, but your peer Catholics don't feel the same way. And there is a space in doctrine and dogma and actually a case in all of these things to not only permit, but affirm abortion. I think that these are really important voices to be able to speak to the general public who is sick and tired of the polarized political conversation around abortion, that immediately shut down when they hear it and they don't want to deal with it because it has become this incredibly onerous thing. And that's scary to me that people shut down when they hear that conversation, because it is something that we need to be talking about, because we're losing our rights, as Reverend D said, we're losing our rights as in front of our eyes, and it's starting here. I think the other piece that I want to affirm is that abortion is part of the spectrum of reproductive care and pregnancy care. You cannot, despite how much everybody has tried, separate it out into we're just making this illegal, or we're just saying that this is not okay, but everything else is okay. It's impossible. And you see that particularly from my perspective as a healthcare provider, when you're in the liminal spaces, when there isn't a bright line between what is an abortion and what is a miscarriage, what is an pregnancy complication and what is an abortion, what is treatment for a life-threatening condition and what is an abortion. It's a spectrum of care, and I, as a healthcare provider and as a physician, need to be able to make those decisions without the interference of non-medical, non-scientists, non-experts telling me what they think is right. And the only other thing I'll say is that despite what a lot of politicians like us believe, we don't live in a theocracy, right? Like, it's okay that you might believe, based in your faith tradition, that abortion is a sin or is wrong. That is absolutely, and you don't have an abortion, and that's fine. And I want to support you in that. But we have to support everybody's faith tradition in this country, and even those who don't have faith. And so this idea that we're making laws based on some sort of acceptability in religion is really terrifying, especially since it's a perversion of those traditions to begin with.
So thank you, Dr. V. And Reverend Deneen, what would you say about the importance of faith voices speaking out in this moment? I think you're.
One of the things that the Christian sacred text says is we overcome by the blood and the word of our testimony. And essentially what that means is no one that I am connected to gets better or experiences triumph if I'm not talking about what's going on with me. As the one who has made the decision to be the leader, then it is my opportunity and responsibility to share my thoughts about what it means for people to have access to comprehensive reproductive health care, and to support people as they journey through based on whatever their own personal decisions are. It's a both and I cannot force someone into a choice because of what I think or believe. I have to make sure that I am open and available. I encourage people to talk about what they believe and share what they believe, and also understand that everyone may not believe what you believe, but it's your responsibility and opportunity to support them as they make their way through.
Thank you, Reverend Deneen. And Nadia, talk to us about the importance of faith voices in this time.
Sure. And I know that you talked about like sort of the dominant narrative is that religion and reproductive rights are, mutually exclusive. And, it's really interesting to Dr. V's point about how religion has been co-opted, and often the loudest voices speaking in defense of religion are actually not the ones that represent the communities that they're speaking for. And it's actually should be somebody's PhD dissertation to like really study it, and how power and privilege even moves within faith communities, and how, many voices are never included or represented in that conversation. And especially when you take into consideration how diverse Muslims are, right? And so really thinking about what is the other narrative that exists that is becoming louder, hopefully, and the work that we're trying to do, which is that the narrative of religion is actually a resource. Religion is a resource for people and a tool of empowerment for people to make decisions about their bodies in a way that they feel is still aligned with their faith beliefs and their faith values. And one of the things that I want to kind of point out is, particularly in the United States, colonialism and, Christian hegemony, that those have really impacted the ways that Muslims in this country are talking about sex and sexuality. Because if you actually look pre-colonialism, the ways in which Muslims approach sex, sexuality, reproductive rights, it was very positive. It was very feminist. And the impacts of colonialism and Christian supremacy has really introduced these notions of shame and stigma when it comes to these issues. And if you look at pre-modern times, even, abortion was actually, I mentioned this, it was rarely debated. It was an issue that was between pregnant people and their providers. The idea of the state interfering or consulting religious authority, it was just not a common practice. It just didn't happen. And that is what we're trying to reclaim. And that is, like, I think the beauty of Islamic history, that agency was given to pregnant people from the beginning. And it's been, co-opted and taken away because of the impact of colonialism and white supremacy and all of that. But that's not our tradition. It's not true to our tradition. And I think it's really important for faith leaders to speak out about that.
Thank you for those thoughts. And I think just to remind folks that are on, you can go to interfaithalliance.org and see much of the work that the Interfaith Alliance is doing in order to both protect democracy and religious freedom in this time. And the Interfaith Alliance's policy statement on reproductive rights and reproductive justice and religious freedom. And I think all of you have so articulated the importance in this time. I think we have a few minutes, and we're getting some questions through private chat. And so, I'll start with one, which is, what words of advice would you give to someone who's counseling a congregant? We have faith leaders on this webinar today, or a patient, or a friend who is making a decision about reproductive health care. That would be one thing we'd love to hear, and you don't all have to answer it. Some questions that have come in is sort of what advice you would give. And then we do want to save a little bit of time because everyone here is asking what they can do in this moment. And so we will want to end on that because we know it's a dark time, but that there's always hope in the work that people do. And so we'll want to end on that. But do one of you want to take this question around what words of advice would you give? We do have folks that are, counseling individual people that are trying to sort of navigate these personal decisions in their lives.
Sure. I mean, I can talk a little bit about how I handle some of these questions that I inevitably get them, as I mentioned, when I'm taking care of patients. And so I always disclose that I'm not a faith expert, or this guy called me a faith leader. I just exist in the world and have interface with faith, and certainly am in and around this space. So I always let people know that. But usually what I say to people, if they ask me, am I going to hell, or is God going to judge me, or something along these lines, I usually say any God that I would ever believe in would never, ever punish someone for making a decision that made sense for them and for their families in the thoughtful and compassionate way that you have made this decision. And if you're going, and then I usually make a little bit of a joke to try to lighten the mood and say, if you're going to hell, I'll see you there. I definitely will be there also. But I think trying to help people find folks who can support them in their beliefs. I oftentimes have folks that come and say, my priest or my reverend or whoever said that I shouldn't do this, or I can't talk to anybody in my community. And I would really, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, Sky, but I would really encourage folks to really help find networks of people who are willing to support people in their reproductive decisions, whether it's to continue a pregnancy that their family doesn't support, or to end a pregnancy that their family doesn't support that decision. Making sure that we can find not only healthcare providers that are supportive of that, but faith community that is supportive of that, so that people have a place to go, have a place to land, and can experience their lives in the most authentic way to them, and making them feel as least judged and as most accepted as possible. When I'm talking to people of the Christian faith tradition, I always talk about how Jesus hung out with the sinners. He hung out with the people who had abortions, who were ostracized from society because they were doing things that the hierarchy said that they shouldn't do. And that's the person that we follow in Christian faith tradition. And so I would hope that people can find folks that are supportive of them. And I think that organizations like all of ours that we've been talking about offer that to people as well.
I can chime in. There's a story that we like to tell about, well, it's not a story, I guess it's a fact, but like one of the greatest names of God in Arabic is Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And so the root word, the root letter, Arabic is like a language that is very connected to different like words that come from the same root. So the root word for Rahman, which is the most compassionate, is also the letters are the same in the word for Raham, which is the womb. And I don't think that is coincidental. Like, I think the fact that, God's greatest quality in Islamic tradition is of compassion, and that the womb is the Arabic word for womb is from the same root letters, shows that the womb is also a space of compassion. And my advice to anyone who is advising someone, helping them navigate this very, very personal and private decision, is that to respond to them with rahma. And we actually have, which is compassion, and we have a framework that rahma is an acronym. So it's responding by listening, it's affirming and believing, honoring their cultural and religious context, maintaining their privacy, and assisting them to find resources, information. And really, that's at the core of every interaction that should happen when somebody is navigating this very personal and private decision.
Thank you, Nadia. Reverend Denise?
I was sitting here thinking, one of the names for God in the Christian context is the big-breasted one. This is the place that you fall into when you're needing love and support, and you're needing care, and also thinking about what is the ultimate thing one needs when one is choosing to access this kind of care. You're needing someone that you can run into, someone that can be present and hold space for you. And that is one of the coolest things I think that Jesus represents. He lived a life of holding space for people who were marginalized and decentered in their culture. And when I'm working with people, I simply say that, first of all, your relationship with the divine is yours. It's not yours and your pastors. It's not yours and your imams. It's not yours and your priests. It is yours. And I ask them, what did the divine say to you? And most often, they said, I'm good. So I said, well, then what are you worried about? How can I support you from that place? and then we move on to do whatever it is that they need done.
Thank you, Reverend Deneen. And that how can I support you from this place, I think is a good place for us to reflect as we're ending the webinar today, which is, I know that folks are asking, and we've seen it in the emails and the chats, what can people do? Lots of folks here on the webinar today, they're not working in the spaces that you all work every day, but they want to know what they can do to support their communities and to support people and to support democracy and religious freedom in this time. So maybe Nadia, could we start with you and go around with what you can do, and then we'll have a few reminders as we close the webinar out. I want to just thank you before you all answer these questions for being here today. I know that you're all incredibly busy. You've taken time out to be with our wonderful group that's attended today. We have some great attendance, and to also just remind folks that we have 3 wonderful organizations represented here today, in addition to the Interfaith Alliance, the National Birth Equity Collaborative, Catholics for Choice, and Heart. And so please learn about those organizations, visit the interfaithalliance.org. And Nadia, do you want to help folks understand what they can do? Because that's what everyone wants to know.
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, I mean, the biggest thing that we can do right now is donate to abortion funds and other grassroots organizations, but especially abortion funds, to make sure that they, can handle the uptake that will happen in their one, if this decision falls, they can handle being in that crisis space for I don't know how long, and also just taking care of those who are providing these services, and our abortion providers and our abortion doulas and people who are kind of in it and making these hard decisions, like Dr. V pointed out, right? The other thing that I would say is educate yourself on these issues about how you can be a resource for others. So do that 101 education so that you can correct misinformation when you hear it. And then also respond with rahma, right? Like really respond with compassion to somebody who is coming to you in their time of need and needing access to these critical reproductive health services.
Dr. V?
I agree with everything Nadia just said. I think in this time and in the coming months, people are going to be in need of deep support, support in a lot of different ways. First, I think that financial support is big, and I think that making sure that you do that through, a recognized and great local abortion fund is fantastic. And oftentimes, I know that I get a little bit panicky when I hear about throwing a fundraiser or something like that. But if you don't have the means to donate yourself, hold a grill out in your backyard in the nice weather and get 15 of your friends together, and you can pretty quickly raise enough money to support somebody getting an abortion that they wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. And so find your local abortion fund. I think figuring out how you can be a space, the way that Reverend Deneen was just talking about, being able to be a place and let people know that you are a place that people can go. If you are a faithful person within that faith tradition, if you're not, just in whatever friendly, compassionate, non-judgmental way you can be, people in your community are going to need support. And so finding a way to do that both interpersonally and, at a policy
Black
level
women can handle
is
pain.
critical. And then the other piece from the healthcare perspective is getting as educated as you can about how safe abortion is, how safe self-managed abortion is with the right information, and making sure that people have access as much as they possibly can to the care that they need, and being able to spread that information as well and combat misinformation.
Thank you, Dr. V. And Reverend Deneen.
Wow. So how can people help? One, you can make sure that when you're in spaces and people are saying things that are contrary to what you believe, speak up. Two, take something that you've learned in this experience this afternoon and share it with 5 people that you love. Commit yourself to educating 5 people that are important to you, and together you do the things that you need to do to support folk in your community. Also, be a safe place for people to run in. And don't be so quick to judge, because we don't know the experiences that folk are going through. And lastly, I will just echo the things that my other colleagues have said. Find a fund that you can support in some way. Find a clinic, a private clinic, or a physician that you can be support to. Bring and buy donuts, bring and buy coffee, actively choosing to be a guard, and supporting people getting into the clinic safely through the religious dogma. And then protesting at a CPC, protesting at a crisis pregnancy center. Gang up on them. That's something that you can do also, because they are spreading crappy information, and keeping people from getting the care that they need, and taking funds away from TANF and SNAP, and other health benefits that people actually, other health resources, excuse me, that people need to support them. So gang up on them. But at the end of the day, we have to vote in ways that support us all being free. Don't stop voting just for what you need, but look around and vote for the needs of the people in your community, the needs of the people who are the most marginalized, and vote for things that will support them. Because if we take care of those that are the least marginalized, we'll all be taken care of. It's really true. So yeah.
Human freedom, that's a great way to end. Vote for human freedom. And thanks for all of you for your time today. We will all take 5 things and go educate 5 people today. And thank you for the time that you've spent with us at the Interfaith Alliance. Again, you can go to interfaithalliance.org if you're on with us today to learn more. Check out the National Birth Equity Collaborative, Catholics for Choice, and Heart. And thank you all for being here and helping to educate us and helping us to find what we can do with our own lives in this time.